Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you someone who we've known for a little while now. And I get the excitement. Last time she came and spoke, I was away. So I get the excitement of actually hearing you speak today. So it's great to have Lauren Mayer back here with us to bring the lesson and to bring music.
Stands up here. And I'm going to start with a song. So let me see if I get myself set up so I can see everything. There. Can you all see? Kind of have to be over here. All right, here we go. In normal times when people meet or catch up on the phone, they ask, "How are you?" to start the conversation. But after what has been the strangest time we've ever known, that answer might require a slight modification. How am I? I'm fine, with an asterisk, which is just to say, my life is a mess and I'm buried in stress, but other than that, I'm okay. I'm good, with an asterisk, which is how my answer gets corrected. Though reality's a pain, it hasn't driven me insane. I'm doing about as well as could be expected. An asterisk's a form of punctuation to indicate you left something out. Like how any given situation might make you want to scream and shout. But instead you say, I'm okay. With an asterisk, I don't need to curse. My life's upside down, but I won't wear a frown, 'cause things could still get way, way worse. I am peachy, with an asterisk, which I'll be saying for a while. Though I may take a licking like Timex, I'll keep ticking so I can manage to smile. If you find your spirits are sinking, look for something that's still okay, like, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how'd you like the play? Then you can say, it was fine. With an asterisk, you don't have to tough your way through it. All sense of normal life is gone, but I'm still hanging on. I don't know how much longer I can do it. So next time we all talk and start making small talk, let's keep it cheerful and brisk. When you ask me how I am, I'll say, I'm fine, with an asterisk. Ugh. So, thank you. So we'd all like to say we're fine, no matter what the challenge is. Maybe without the asterisk, right? I mean, that's what all the experts tell us. We're supposed to be positive. We're supposed to view life through rose-colored glasses. Sounds great, right? But it's not always that easy to do. And these things are a little hard to see through. So I'm going to suggest that we flip that advice about positivity inside out. And instead of trying to view life through the lenses of rose-colored glasses, we try a different lens, the lens of humor. Now, that isn't to say that you can laugh your way out of major life crises or that jokes will make our problems all go away. But my philosophy is, in general, if you can laugh at it, you can deal with it. Laughter is a great stress release. It helps us relax, and it puts us in a better mind frame to deal with whatever life throws at us. Plus, humor can help give us some new strategies to deal with those challenges. So today, we're going to take a new spin on the conventional wisdom about positivity. Okay, so first, the main advice everybody gives is you just got to choose to smile. I mean, smiling, there's research that the physical effort of just lifting those cheeks up does change your brain chemistry. And scientists and doctors are fond of reminding us that it takes fewer muscles to smile than it does to frown. So we don't want to frown. And yet sometimes we can't help it, right? And then we just feel terrible about ourselves that we can't stop frowning. And then we feel worse about the challenges that we have and less able to deal with them, and that the thing that made us want to seek that advice in the first place. Well, it turns out, and we don't just get that from doctors and scientists, experts, self-help teachers, spiritual leaders, even popular songs give us that message. Have you ever heard, "Smile though your heart is breaking"? Excuse me, my heart is breaking, and you want me to smile too? Or there's the song from Annie, the musical, "You're never fully dressed without a smile," advising people suffering through the Great Depression to smile, darn you, smile. Sounds great, but that's not going to pay those overdue bills. Well, it turns out all that nonstop positivity isn't just difficult, it may not always be the best thing for us, which was beautifully illustrated by the Pixar movie Inside Out, rather. If you remember that movie, it takes place mostly inside of the mind of a young girl named Riley. And we get to know her emotions as represented by the characters of joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. That character was kind of cute. Riley's parents are always advising her to be their happy girl, to be positive, even as she copes with moving to a new, unfamiliar neighborhood. So inside her head, the character Joy tries to get rid of sadness and all the other emotions until she realizes that actually to cope with her new life, Riley needs to feel all of her emotions. I don't know about you, I loved that movie, and it really resonated with me. I grew up in the 60s and early 70s, and that was the era of think positive and the big yellow happy face, right? Plus, as a woman, I have had more than my share of people telling me, "Honey, you would look so much more attractive if you smiled more." Anybody else hear that? Yeah, well, turns out we all need our full component of emotions, and fewer jerks telling us to smile more, right? A variation on this theme is optimism, which is a sense of positivity about the future. And who wouldn't want to be an optimist, right? We all want to choose optimism. Except think about it, nonstop optimism can sometimes lead us to make bad choices if we give in to unrealistic expectations. I mean, how many times have you ever met a hardcore gambler who was a pessimist? Think about it, right? It takes optimism to gamble. I'm not saying we all should be pessimists so we don't gamble. I'm saying it would be nice to have a balance, right? Think about it, it takes optimism to apply for a better job. Dash of pessimism will keep you from quitting your current job until you get the new one, right? It took optimism to invent an automobile, pessimism to invent brakes. Optimists invented the airplane, pessimists invented the parachute. You see where I'm going with this? It's like the optimist and the pessimist are talking, and the pessimist says, "Things are so awful, they can't get any worse." And the optimist says, "Sure they can." We want a balance, right? Like that's illustrated in a fairly well-known folk tale about, the way I heard it, was a Russian peasant farmer who saves up and finally has enough money to buy a new horse. And it runs away. And his neighbor says, "Oh, that's terrible, such bad news." And the farmer says, "Good news, bad news, who can say?" The horse comes back, bringing with it a wild horse it met while it was out running free. The neighbor says, "Such good news." And the farmer says, "Maybe you want to join me. Good news, bad news, who can say?" But let's make him sound like an old Russian peasant farmer. "Good news, bad news, who can say?" The farmer gives the new horse to his son, who tries to break it. Well, the horse throws him off and the son breaks his leg. And the neighbor says, "Oh, he broke his leg, such bad news." And the farmer says, "Good news, bad news, who can say?" The Tsar's men come through town, and it's soldiers who are conscripting all the young men for the military. But they leave the farmer's son because he's got a broken leg. And the neighbor says, "Hey, they spared your son, such good news." And the farmer says, "Good news, bad news, who can say?" There's a lot of versions of that. Have any of you heard that story? Yeah, it's not always Russian. Sometimes it's a Chinese peasant rice farmer. It's all sorts of variations. But all the variations stop after the soldiers come through for military duty, right? I don't know about you, I always wanted to know what happened next. So in my version, the son decides he's had it up to here with all this good news, bad news, farming, military stuff. So he goes into something more stable, like, I don't know, being a door-to-door storyteller. That was the Russian peasant version of stand-up comedy, I guess. So turns out he's pretty good at it. He makes enough money to buy his parents a nice house in town. So they still have a mix of good news and bad news, but they have enough to eat and fewer pogroms. So they end up happily ever after. But the whole point of that story and Inside Out is that we need a mix of joy and sadness, a mix of pessimism and optimism, so that we can lead more realistically fulfilled lives, feel all our emotions, and it makes for more entertaining stories. So that's one way to consider this. Another piece of advice that has people hear all the time is, look at this. Hope my water bottle will stay. See that? I'm going to be optimistic but pessimistic that I'm going to watch it just in case it falls. Another piece of advice we get all the time is look at the glass half full. You've all heard that one, right? That metaphor always puzzled me because, of course, it implies that you want the glass full all the way, which is going to make it more prone to falling over, right? And then you end up with a big mess and an empty glass. But more seriously, that image always troubled me because by saying you should look at the glass half full, that to me is saying not just be grateful for what you have, but ignore what you don't have. And if you can't, there's something wrong with you. And that always puzzled me. I mean, am I supposed to ignore the things that I don't have yet or give up on them altogether? And if I can't, does that make me a bad person? And besides, even with a half full glass, I'll probably still bump into it and knock it over, and then I'll still have a mess to clean up and an empty glass. This kind of negative self-talk, I think, is pretty familiar, particularly among people in the performing arts. There's all these stories about even major stars who, no matter how well they're doing, they can be playing arenas with thousands of people who are loving their show, but somehow their attention is always drawn to that one person who's scowling. Fortunately, nobody here is, but let's just pretend there's one person there in the back scowling. You can't take your eyes off them. I know that happened to me once. I was doing a corporate comedy show where I had written some specific material for the CEO. And people seemed to be enjoying it, except for this one woman in the front row who was scowling at me. And of course, I couldn't stop looking at her, and I was wondering, how did I offend her? I mean, everything I was doing was super clean because it was a corporate audience. And the only thing I was making fun of was the competitor's product and the CEO. Well, maybe she secretly works for the competition and she's a spy. Maybe that's why she's upset. Maybe she's secretly in love with the CEO and horrified that I'm making fun of him, even though he's the one who hired me to do the show and to roast him as sort of a team bonding exercise for all of his employees. Anyway, as you can tell, I kind of forgot where I was in the show. I was obsessed with what I had done to offend this woman. And after the show, people were talking to me. The CEO loved it. People were very pleased. And she walked up to me, and I'm thinking, what's she going to say? She walked up and stuck out her hand and said, "Honey, you were so funny, I almost laughed out loud." Like, I try to remember that whenever I find myself focusing on potential negatives, but it's hard. And it's human. We tend to focus on the negative. Well, it turns out it's not just common, it's hardwired into us by evolution. Look at it this way. Imagine you're a primitive human, and you've got two things competing for your attention. A positive, there's a tree with really juicy looking apples. Up at the top, they're a little out of reach. How am I going to get those? But they look wonderful. The negative, a saber-toothed tiger running towards you about to pounce. And then think about the consequences of which you choose to focus on. If you focus on the positive, the beautiful, juicy fruit at the top of that tree, by the time you even get up one branch, the saber-toothed tiger is going to come rip you from limb to limb. If you focus on the negative, the tiger coming towards you, and you run, you might miss the juicy fruit up there, but you'll live to go find them another day. Well, what do you think evolution rewarded our ancestors with? Focusing on the negative, right? Because the people who focused on the negative were the ones who survived. and they've passed on that tendency to us. So it's actually human nature to focus on the negative. Now, in our case, of course, the consequences of choosing the wrong focus are not so life-threatening. It's, do we focus on whether there's people smiling or not smiling at us, or whether we're going to do well or not well in a business presentation. So the consequences aren't as bad, but we're still dealing with hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary hardwiring. So can we forgive ourselves if we have a tendency to focus on the negative? And instead of ignoring it, maybe we can find a positive in the negative. Example I love of this is the choreographer and director Bob Fosse. Has anybody heard of Bob Fosse? Okay, super brilliant, talented, messed up personally if you watch the Fosse-Verdon TV show. But anyway, he developed this very distinctive dance style. Knees in, slouching. This thing called jazz hands, which is waving fingers, bowler hats pulled down. Critics raved. It was so innovative. How did he come up with it? I'll tell you how he came up with it. He was a struggling young dancer, not doing very well because he didn't fit the classic dancer body. He had lousy turnout, that's that ability to open up at the hips that you really need in ballet. He had kind of bad posture, his hands were really too big for his frame, and he was prematurely bald. So he leaned into all of that, as if to say, turned in, slouching, big-fingered jazz hands aren't a flaw, they're cool. Now, the hat was just because he was vain about being bald, but everything else was a creative way of turning a negative into a positive. Another showbiz example that I really like is Cheetah Rivera. Have you heard of her? She was the original Anita in the stage version of West Side Story, but was replaced by Rita Moreno for the movie. She was the original Rosie in Bye Bye Birdie, was replaced by Janet Leigh for the movie. She has a memoir out in which she dishes about losing those movie roles. If you like audiobooks, I highly recommend it because she reads it and she's great. And she talks about when she was a child, she was really rambunctious and accident prone. She was always running around, falling off trees, banging up, getting hurt. And she liked to jump on the furniture in her house. Well, one day she's doing her usual, jumping from the chair to the couch to the table, and she miscalculated and crashed foot first into the very fragile bamboo coffee table. Her mother didn't have enough money to replace it. She was a widow with young children and very little money. But instead of going ballistic, she decided this is a child that needs an outlet for her excess energy. So she enrolled her in the local dance school, figuring she may not be any good, but at least it'll give her some focus for all that energy. Rivera turned out to be a brilliantly talented dancer, got a scholarship to the American Ballet Theater School in New York. But here's another glass half full, half empty. She was short, curvy, dark-skinned Hispanic in an era where ballerinas were tall, thin, blonde, and pale. She could have gone glass half full. Well, at least I'm here. Maybe I'll be a swan in the back row. Instead, she went glass half empty. I'm never going to be a prima ballerina. Forget that. I'm out of here. I'm auditioning for musicals, where her distinctive look was an asset, and she became a huge star. Now, I'm not saying we can all turn our supposed negatives into show business success, but maybe we can find something about ourselves that we can lean into a little bit. For example, I talk a lot with my hands, which would make me terrible working with delicate jewelry, but it's an asset as a speaker, and maybe somebody is shy, but that makes them a good listener, or they obsess about the small stuff, but that makes them a great engineer, or somebody who works with jewelry. The idea is that maybe we can turn our negatives into a positive. And if you can't, why not fully lean into the negative? Let's say you're going on a vacation, you can't stop thinking about all the things that might go wrong and it's making you even more stressed out. Why not lean into it? I'm gonna go to this airport, they're gonna lose my luggage, my flight will be canceled, I'll be stuck at the airport for 2 days with nothing to eat but stale Wetzel's pretzels. And then I'll get to my destination and it'll turn out the tropical island that we had fantasies about is going through a rare tropical multiple disaster called tornadoes full of locusts, and then there'll be a snowstorm and everybody will freeze except for the locusts. Well, by the time you crack yourself up with your ludicrous imagination, you'll realize it's probably not going to be that bad. You can relax enough to do what you can do about it, which is make lists and pack snacks. So I'm going to close with a variation on that theme of let yourself imagine what could go wrong and just go crazy with it. So your part, if you can put up the slide, is it could be worse. So let me just pull up the track for that. Hold on one second. Sorry, my phone put itself to sleep. Here we go. All right, so you ready to sing along and enjoy what could be worse? Whether you are barely getting by or quite successful, it seems like everybody faces times that are quite stressful. But when you're feeling overwhelmed by everything you see, you might find some peace of mind with this philosophy. It could be worse. You could send so many frustrated texts that you sprain both of your thumbs. You could have a migraine on the day your neighbor takes up playing the drums. A plague of locusts could reduce your vacation home to a pile of crumbs. So here's a line that we can rehearse. Remember, it could always be worse. You could blow a giant bubblegum bubble that bursts all over your hair. You could go for a hike to relax and get attacked by a rabid bear. You could be hit by a car the day you forgot your mom's advice about clean underwear and they cut your pants off in front of the nurse. So remember, it could always be worse when things don't work out as we planned and we all ask what happened. It's hard to cope and maintain hope that maybe all this and you might feel much better if you take a tip from me. Folks everywhere faced way more despair throughout world history. Whee! It could be, at least it's not the bubonic plague before anesthesia and penicillin, or the Spanish Inquisition where people faced some pretty painful grilling, or the Depression where apples were so expensive they had to use Ritz crackers to fill in to make a pie that wouldn't empty your purse. So remember, it could always be worse. It's not the early days of computers that you can't use without understanding coding. 19th century appliances that you'd use before they were exploding. We're not in Salem trying to prove we're not witches by drowning instead of floating. A verdict that's hard to reverse. So remember, it could always be worse. At these times, if you're immersed in stress that makes you want to curse, those anxious feelings you can reverse if you remember. It could always be worse. It could always be worse. It could always be worse. Thank you. Take a couple of deep breaths. Let yourself get centered. If it helps, you can inhale as the notes go up, and then exhale as they go down. If that's not a good pace, breathe however you want. Just focus on whatever your intention is for today. Or if you want to think about one of those things we discussed, something that you might have once considered a negative, but instead of ignoring, you can find a positive flip on it. A tendency to be late that could make you the life of the party because you can make an entrance. Your loved ones is actually a sign of how much you care. Or at the very least, maybe think about new ways that you can find more humor in your day-to-day life. Or just give yourself permission to not always be smiling all the time. Let a few more breaths out.
Thank you, Lauren. That was wonderful without an asterisk. It was really great to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we hope you'll be back.
I will. I love this community. Thank you.
So here at Unity Spiritual Center, we are an ocean of love. Here at Unity Spiritual Center, we have an inspiring vision, an exciting mission, and compelling values by which we strive to live. Each week we will join together in saying one of our statements. Please join me in saying this week's statement, which is our vision statement. Our vision is, centered in God, we co-create a world powerfully transformed through the growing movement of shared spiritual awakening. And in this space, feeling so inspired by our vision, mission, and values, and feeling so enriched by what we've experienced here today, let us take time now to be a channel for enrichment through our generous tithes and love offerings. As Lauren shares another song, you're invited to support this congregation with a check made out to USC, or by cash, or by making a donation online. If you are here in the sanctuary, the ushers will come forward to take your offering. Practicing the principle of tithing ourselves as a spiritual community, we are pleased to tithe 10% of the offering collected every Sunday to various Unity organizations and local nonprofits serving our city. So let's take a moment now to bless our tithe and love offerings as we cup them in our hands or hold them next to our hearts. Let us say our offering blessing, which is on the screen. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God.
What is mine to give? What is mine to do? All I want is to share myself with you. So I stand here asking, what can I do? What is mine to give? I give it to you. What is mine to give? What is mine to do? All I want is to share myself with you. So I stand here asking, what can I do? What is mine to give? I give it to you.
So please join me in blessing our tithes and love offerings. Spirit of the living God, bless the acts of our hands, our minds, our hearts. May everything offered here at Unity Spiritual Center be a reflection of all that is good within us. Grant us the courage to patiently listen for the stirring of your presence. Enliven our spirits with humor. Fill us with reverence for one another and gratitude for our diversity. May unity, beauty, and truth be the fruit of all we do, and so it is. Amen. We turn now to our gratitude for this service happening. We are grateful, of course, to Lauren for being here today, for bringing a message and music. We are grateful to Ben for his technological wizardry, and that I'm sure the people on Zoom are clapping too. We're grateful to Shirley and Ethel for providing ushering services. I think I've got everybody. Yes? Did I miss anyone? There's no platform assistant, so. Our announcements are that the new member class is happening August 10th, which is a Thursday at 4 o'clock on Zoom. If you're interested in membership, just pick up a flyer in the entryway or see me, and we will make sure you're part of that class. The drumming circle will next be held on August 6th. I got the wrong month for a moment, which is next week. So next week, next Sunday at 1:30 here in the sanctuary. Our dance meditation is returning August 19th, Saturday at 1 o'clock here in the sanctuary. Barbara Pena is going to lead us. And if you haven't been, it's really a wonderful time. So I encourage you to come out, yes. And volunteer opportunities, there are plenty. This church runs on volunteers, so don't hesitate. And hospitality, there is going to be hospitality in the Fillmore room next door. And if you want to provide for that sometime, feel free. We're always open to goodies. And finally, the daily word readings and guided meditations happen Monday and Thursdays at noon via Zoom. We don't have children here today, but we know they need to be blessed anyways. So channel a child in your mind and let's bless them. We love you, we bless you, we appreciate you, and we behold the presence of God in you, empowering you to do great things. Let there be peace. And so we go forth into this week, glasses half full or glasses half empty, optimistic or pessimistic. We go forth knowing that wherever we go, God is there with us. And so let us go forth knowing that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Wherever I am, God is. And all is well. Thank you, God.